Today, we're building us a portable power station for fishing or camping or just in case of an emergency, whatever. About 80% of the stuff that I used in this power station came from Harbor Freight. But I'm pretty sure you could build a power station with 100% of it coming from Harbor Freight. I already had some stuff laying around, so I used it. Anyway, this is gonna take a little bit, so let's get started on it. You guys may remember a couple of years ago, I made an ammo box video where I took ammo boxes and made different hacks with them. Well, on one of them, I took a kayak battery, just like this one, and I made a small power station that you could take fishing and charge all your stuff on, you know what I'm saying? Well, it turned out that hack was the one that everybody really liked. And honestly, I liked it a lot too. Well, recently, a company called Golden Mate, well, they wanted to send me a battery to test out and see how I liked it. And I'm not really one of them technical testing out channels all that much. But we do like building things, don't we? I actually went on YouTube and there's several channels that's tested this battery out. They actually cracked this thing open, took it apart, and run tests on it. It has a low temperature sensor, it has a high temperature sensor, and on every video I watched, everybody seemed to like this battery. So I told them to send me one because I had an idea. The power station that I built with this battery out of an ammo box, well, we're going to build a bigger power station, and this new power station is actually going to run for DC 12 volt and AC 120 volt.
Speaking of batteries, I found a ton of batteries washed up on the beach.
Really?
Yep, seashells on the seashore. What happens when a battery commits a crime? It gets charged.
So to get ready to do this hack, I hopped in my truck and I drove to Harbor Freight. When I got there, I seen these stackable toolboxes that would work perfect for this video. And actually, they're not priced that bad either. Well, I ended up getting this toolbox right here. And this is one of those stackable toolboxes where you can put toolboxes on top of each other and keep building them up. And I like it for two reasons. For one, it's stackable. And I'll explain that a little bit later on in the video. But reason number two why I like it, it comes with these wheels on it and it's got a handle made onto it. You can pull these two handles in right here. Then you can extend this thing and it basically makes it easier to move around. Even though this battery don't weigh that much. I mean, I can pick it up with my left hand and I'm right-handed. It really don't weigh that much because it's lithium. But even though this battery don't weigh that much, this box is still gonna have a little bit of weight in it when we're done because we're gonna put a lot of stuff in there to make this thing work. So, like I said, these wheels are gonna be handy. I bought one of these cheap little battery trays that you can get off of Amazon or anywhere, and I'm gonna install it first into our toolbox so our battery's not sliding around everywhere. I've got some of this double-sided Gorilla tape. I always got some of this. This stuff's handy. I'm gonna put some of this double-sided tape onto the bottom of this tray and that'll almost hold it by itself. And then we'll put maybe 4 screws in it and that should hold it still. We need to fasten down this tray good because it's what holds the strap that holds the battery. So let's put her in there. That battery ain't going nowhere now. So I ended up grinding it down to the nut. I just ground off all the extra bolt that was sticking out. That way this thing sets down nice and flat. I got a lot of hardware to go in this thing. So the next thing we're gonna do, I gotta cut this rib right here out all the way down. And I'm gonna cut this rib out. I'm gonna leave this one and I'm gonna leave this one. I'll tell you what, I ain't sponsored by any tool companies or anything like that. These little multi-tools, they're freaking handy when you need them. Look at that, cut that rib out perfectly smooth. So next, I got this here old beat up board and I'm gonna cut this thing down to fit in that spot. And then I'm gonna sand it and I'm gonna paint it black and make it match our toolbox. While our wood is over here drying, we've got a lot of other stuff we got installed into this box. So this right here is a kill switch. I'm gonna mount this kill switch right here on the side, and it's basically so I can cut all the power off to this thing when we're not using it. Now, I can drill a hole and mount this from the inside, or I could drill a hole and mount this from the outside. But first thing we gotta do before we decide which way we wanna mount it is drill our hole. I'm using a 2 1/8 inch hole saw. And this hole saw has seen better days, but it should work fine for plastic. I think a 2-inch hole saw would work perfect, but I don't have a 2-inch hole saw. So the next thing that I'm going to be installing is this right here. And this is a plug for solar panels. That's right. We're making a solar generator. But I'm also designing this thing to where I can charge it up with a charger before I go fishing or camping or whatever. After you get there and your battery starts depleting, you can charge it back up with the sun while you're doing whatever you're doing. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, this is the side that goes to the solar panel. But we need another one to go inside our box. And this plug right here mounts onto this bracket right here. So I'm gonna have to cut a hole, which I've already marked out, so we can fit this bracket into our box. So now we got our power switch hooked up. We got our solar panel plug installed. All you had to do is plug this thing in. Then you hook up the other end to your solar panels. And you can unplug this when you're not using it. The next thing I'm going to install is a fan. And as you can see, I got it running. I'm checking it out. It actually runs off a USB plug. It's got a cover for the outside to keep it protected, and it's got a cover for the inside too. It also comes with everything you need to install it. Since our switch is right here and our solar panel plug's right here, so I think I'm gonna install the fan on this side of the box. The wiring for this fan is gonna be really simple, because later when I hook up the power inverter that'll make it 110, see that USB right there? I can just plug the fan right into the power inverter and it'll run our fan for us. You know what's crazy is how quiet this thing is. You hear it? I don't hear it either. It's pretty dang quiet. Anyway, let's get this fan installed. I got a few scratches on it cutting it, but it don't look half bad. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go around the top and I'm gonna drill just a few holes here and there. That's gonna make it not be waterproof, but it's not gonna be waterproof anyway. When we put the lid on this thing, if it seals up too tight, it's not gonna be able to pull air out. So we're gonna drill a few holes around the top. Our battery's gonna be over here, and I've got more room on this side. I've been installing this 110. I'm installing this 120 outlet. It's just an outlet. You can run a TV, a coffee pot, whatever you want to on. It's made to where we can install it in our box. And all it really is an extension cord. Just a short little extension cord. Because when we put our inverter in, it's already got receptacles in it. We can just plug it into our inverter. Then we have a way that we can plug into our box without having to take the lid off. Got our plug in. It's even got a little cover on it right there. And like I said, all we gotta do is plug this thing into the inverter later. We got 3 more of these little things to put in. 2 of them are USB connectors. These run off a DC or 12 volts. This is a voltage indicator, and it basically tells you how many volts you got left in your battery. So now we got all of our plugs and switches and everything else mounted on this box. We've got our cutoff switch that cuts our power on and cuts our power off. We've got a plug right here that we're able to hook our solar panels to and charge our batteries. Now right here on the front is our DC section. We've got 2 of these that you can open up, charge your phone, charge your GoPro, charge whatever. This little guy right here is a battery indicator. It'll tell us how many volts is left in our battery so we don't run it too low and hurt it. And right here, we've got 120 volts of power, which remember, it's just an extension cord that'll go to our inverter. And of course, we got a fan to keep this system cool. Next, we're gonna put the guts in this thing. And of course, the major part of it is the battery, but that's the last thing I'll be installing. And the major parts of our system will be this inverter, which is 600 watts. I prefer the pure sine wave inverter. You can get a modified inverter a little bit cheaper than the pure sine, but the electric waves that come off of these pure sine inverters are cleaner than what's running into your house off the grid. So you've got a lot less chance of hurting your laptops and your TVs and stuff like that. And then we got us a fuse box. And we got fuses to go in it. This fuse box right here will have everything that runs off of DC wired through it. And it'll keep everything safe. Next, we got our solar charge controller. Now, I don't know everything about solar power, but I do know it's best to use a MTTP, I think it is, or a TMMP. Anyway, this is not one. This is a cheap solar charge controller. But I ain't gonna be running my house off of this thing. I just want it where I can take advantage of the sun while I'm fishing, or in an emergency and I can't get gas. I could use this to power my refrigerator or something, and this will pull from a solar panel and charge our battery back up. The first thing our wiring will go through is these 2 bus bars. Do you remember at the beginning of the video when I cut all these little bitty fins off right here? Then I cut out a board and painted it black. Well, this is the reason I cut the board out. And I can bolt this board onto the back of this toolbox. But before I bolt this board in, we are going to mount all these components onto that board and then bolt them all in there at one time. Look, people, I ain't never done this before, but this just seems like the easiest way. Got our whole panel put together now and ready to go into our box. This thing is really simple to wire. You see this red bus bar? Well, the wire will come off the battery, then it's going to be wired through our switch. The wire that comes off of this switch will go right here on the bottom of this bus bar. And of course, the negative wire from our battery will go onto the bottom of this bus bar. It's black because it's negative. Then we'll have to run one of our positive cables to our inverter. We'll run the other positive cable over to this fuse box right here. We'll run one negative cable from our bus bar over to the negative on our inverter. Then the other negative cable on our bus bar will hook right into here on top of our fuse box. And that is all we need to wire right now. Now you're gonna need the right size cables for all this stuff. I bought some 2-gauge cable. I got this at Harbor Freight. I'm gonna use this 2-gauge cable from our battery to the switch and to both bus bars. Then I'll probably also use it from the bus bars to the inverter. But from the bus bars to the fuse box, we don't really need anything that thick. I'll probably use like a 10-gauge cable. Okay, I changed my mind. I'm gonna move our inverter over that way a little bit because I'm gonna put this 100-watt fuse in between it and the battery. Okay, so I got that fixed. I just slid my inverter over. You know, when you do this, you can use any brand of toolbox that you want, and you can configure all your parts any way you want. I'm just showing you how simple this is. But now we can add our waterproof fuse. You know what I'm saying? Now, when we start wiring this thing, we're gonna need the right size of wire. There's all kinds of wire, like this is 16 gauge. This is 18 gauge. This right here is This is 10 gauge. This is 2 gauge. It's very simple to go on Google and just Google 600 watt inverter. It'll tell you exactly what size wire you need for it. The other thing we're going to need is connectors. There's all different kinds of connectors. These connectors right here are the heat shrink connectors. So in other words, when you put them on and you crimp them, this is heat shrink tube. So all you have to do is heat this stuff up. The little yellow and the dark red ones, those are hard. I like the heat shrink kind personally. And you're probably going to need some kind of battery lugs. Now they make all different kinds of tools for putting battery lugs on. This one is kind of in the middle of the road. They make cheaper ones and they make more expensive ones. And they make all kinds of different tools for putting connectors on. You've probably seen this right here. That's for the connectors. That's for stripping the wire. With these pliers right here, they cost a little bit more and they do a really nice job, and you kind of hard to mess them up. And I like these automatic wire strippers. You just put your wire in there and pulls it right off for you. It's kind of cool. When we're doing this big wire like this, you're probably gonna have to use a razor blade unless you got a tool to do it. I don't. But next, I'm gonna wire this thing all up and show you how it's supposed to go. Okay, so I've put lugs on this 2 gauge wire using these lug crimpers, these hydraulic lug crimpers, and they ain't nothing but junk. Every time I get a lug put on it, just pulls right off. So I cut up all my wire the sizes I need them, and I'm going to take them and have some good lugs put on them by somebody that knows what the heck they're doing. Anyway, we got to get this problem solved. I've been working on this too long. That's what I was doing wrong. I wasn't using a pocket knife.
Oh my God, who's Purple Jack? Sometimes you need a real professional. Hunter Buff is a real professional.
The hydraulic one wasn't purple though.
That's true. That's true. It's gotta be purple.
It gotta be purple.
Crazy purple.
Harbor Freight sells a purple one now.
Oh, never mind then. They got purple? That's for women. I like the camouflage impact. I can dig it, but Purple Jack, I don't know.
I like purple. I'd probably buy a black jack over any other color, I'd imagine.
Heavy duty straight tube, ain't it?
Yeah, no kidding. It's good. It's got the glue in it too.
Man, I really appreciate it. How much I owe you?
About $300.
$3?
300.
Holy. Okay, we got our wires. Let's start wiring this thing together. Okay, so I got this thing all wired together, and these wires are so thick and stiff, it's kind of hard to get them in there. And I'm just going to reconfigure this thing a little bit. I think I'm going to move the charge controller up here and move the fuse down here, and I think it might work better that way. We about to find out. Yeah, that looks a lot neater. Now I just gotta run one wire off the positive side and one wire off the negative side over to our fuse box. For that, I'm gonna use 10 gauge wire. All this fuse box is gonna do is basically charge our phones and stuff. So 10 gauge wire should be plenty big enough for this. I'm gonna use one of these big connectors for our 10 gauge wire that'll fit on this bolt. Then when I run it over to here, I'll use a smaller connector. These connectors tell you right on the connector what gauge wire they're for. This one's for a 22 to a 16. What I'm going to use goes from a 12 gauge wire to a 10 gauge wire. And since we're using 10 gauge wire, we need to use the yellow ones. I know it don't look yellow, but that's what it is, yellow. You got blue, yellow, and red. The reason I'm explaining that to you is if you got some crimpers like this, they work really good, and it has a red dot, a blue dot, and a yellow dot. Me using the yellow connector, I'm gonna have to use this crimper right here. And as you can see, this one shrunk all the way down, and you see the end right there? That's glue coming out there. That means these are marine grade, and that glue right there means this thing is sealed up really good. Now I got these wires cut perfect But look at that crap. The positives down here and the negatives up there. I put them on backwards. You can tell I ain't no electrician. But there's an easy solution. We're just gonna flip our box around, that's all.
What do you call an electrician that tries to become a carpenter?
Oh, Lord.
Bad electrician. What do you call a carpenter that tries to become an electrician?
Bad carpenter?
Deceased. What kind of cars do electricians drive?
Electric cars?
Volkswagens. Get it, Volkswagens?
Now, all the changes I've made, do you see how forgiving this is? You can move stuff around and make it work. So the next step, we're going to take this whole board and we're going to set it in our toolbox in that place that we cut out in the beginning of the video. I already know it fits, so we can just slide it down in there until it stops on this little lip that sticks out. Then I got some of these self-starting screws with big heads on them. We're going to screw these through the back of the toolbox to hold our board in place. It's starting to look like something now. It's pretty cool, actually. And I already hooked up a few things because it really goes easy and simple after you get to this point. Like, for instance, our fan runs off a USB. I ran the USB right up to the inverter and I plugged it into the inverter, and that's all you had to do. And this plug right here, remember I told you it was an extension. I actually tie strapped it right here so it would be out of the way of the battery and everything. Run it under the fan, then I plugged it into our inverter. So the inverter sends the power out to this plug. This negative cable right here will go straight to the battery. I'm just sticking it over there out of the way. Now the positive cable coming off our other bus bar runs to our switch, and then we'll run it from the switch to the battery, and we'll be able to cut all this stuff off when we're not using this box. When it runs from the battery to the inverter, I got it going through this fuse. But technically, I probably could have skipped that part because there's fuses in our inverter that'll kill the power there. If something happens and it overheats. Now running over to this fuse box is a fuse, so we don't need a fuse there. So the next step, I'm gonna hook up these two power supplies to our fuse box. This here is a battery indicator, and I'm probably gonna hook it straight to the battery. All I did was get me 4 cables, put my ends on them like I showed you. I run them down through this little loop right here. Then I brought it around through these 2 loops. They're just plastic cable clamps that I got from Harbor Freight, and they look like that. And you're supposed to use a bolt with them. But the thing is, we got enough bolts in this toolbox already. Plus, I didn't want it looking like crap. So I took me one of these clamps and I took me some black tape. I wrapped the black tape around the end where the bolt is supposed to go. Once I got it done, I trimmed it off with scissors. Then I took double-sided Gorilla Tape, which is really strong stuff. I cut me a narrow little piece off and I stuck it onto the back of it, and I trimmed it off as well. Well, after you're done, you have something like this. It'll hold your wires and your cables, and you don't have to drill another hole in it. Once I got it run through all those loops like I wanted, then I put me some cable connectors on all my wires. I hooked the positive cables up here on the fuse side. I hooked my negative cables down here on the negative side. Everything in this power station is looking really nice and neat. And we only have one more thing to do before we put the battery in here. That is to wire up the solar charge controller. It's basically the same as a charger. I mean, this charger will charge the battery, it'll keep it maintained, and it won't overcharge it. This solar charge controller does the same exact thing. The only difference is you don't plug this one right here into a wall outlet and it charges your batteries. You plug it into solar panels. Or our solar panels are coming through this side right here. And the other cable will plug in there and we'll hook our solar panels to them. This is 10 gauge wire, might be a little overkill, but I think it's about right. So what we really need to do is run our wire from our solar panels into this first slot. You see that little solar panel? You got a positive and negative. Now the picture right beside of the solar panel is a battery. We need to have 2 wires coming from the battery going to our battery. We're gonna loosen these screws up, and it has holes in the bottom. Well, all we gotta do is stick our wires up in the hole, tighten that screw up. It's as simple as that. So now we got our solar charge controller hooked up. These 2 wires right here run to the solar panel. They go over here to this plug, and this is the other side of the plug that plugs in there. Well, once all that's plugged in, I can hook this right here to our solar panels, and it's gonna send power from here into the solar charge controller, and it's gonna send it out here at the battery terminal to our battery, which is not in here yet. That way we can charge the system with the sun. Now, coming out from the battery, I just got a negative cable in the negative terminal, and I got a positive cable. But instead of using a cable, I had this fuse right here that I had for another project and I didn't use. That way, if something does happen and this thing kind of overcharges or sends too much juice, it'll just blow our fuse out. And finally, we get to the battery. The best part of this build. Like I said before, Golden Mate Batteries wanted to send me a battery to try out. And I was honest, I told them I'll build something with it because I'm not a tech channel, but I've watched a lot of tech channels. They say the sensor protections are good and the battery seems to be made well. I got a bunch of fishermen watching my channel, and y'all know these lithium batteries are expensive. Well, this battery right here is on sale for like $279. I'll leave a link to it in my description box. That'll take you right to it. And you can get one if you're interested in doing something like this. But if nothing else, you could get a couple of these, put them in your boat, and you got some lithium batteries in your boat. But anyway, let's get this battery inside our new power station that is freaking awesome. And let's finish hooking this thing up so we can try it out. I set the battery down in there and I put the strap on, and it's good and tight. When you get to this point, pull the little plastic. Dagnabbit. When you get to this point, pull these little plastic tops off of the bolts that come with the battery. You can put these back on there if you want to, so you don't have a place where stuff can arc off of it. We're gonna run a cable off our switch to our battery terminal, and it's basically going to power everything. And the cable I'm going to run over there, I put a fuse on the end. That way we have a fuse on the battery just in case something goes wrong. You see what I mean by you can put these caps back on to kind of protect the terminals. I got the negative battery cable coming off the battery. I got the negative for the solar hooked straight to the battery. I got the negative for the wall mount charger. This hooks into this right here, plug it in the wall and charge it before you leave the house. And I got the negative for our power gauge hooked up to the negative too. But to the positive, all I have is the wire that's going over to the switch and the wire for the charger so it can charge it with a wall mount. The wire for this gauge right here is on the other side of the switch, and the positive solar charger control wire is on the other side of the switch. But the reason I did it that way, when I flip this switch, it's gonna kill everything, because if this stays on or if this indicator stays on, it's gonna run our battery down. Anyway, that's enough talking. I'm ready to see if this thing works. It's working. Our fan's working. Our inverter's on, so it's working. Our solar charge controller is working. That is freaking cool. It says this battery has 13.2 volts. The one on the outside says it has 13.4 volts. So I'm gonna have to check this thing and see which one's right. But it's still cool that you can look at this from the outside. You see the green? I'm guessing it'll go around and tell you when the battery's dead. But everything I've learned from studying about solar and batteries, they say that you can charge up batteries sometimes to like 14 volts. But once they get down to 12.2 volts, you need to kill that thing, because you'll damage your battery if it goes below 12.2 volts. You need to remember that. This thing is freaking awesome. This little fan is freaking cool. Well, let's hook something up to this thing and see if it works. Now, this is a set of my work lights that I use when I'm working on my car, and they're pretty dang bright. They're like 10,000 lumens, and you can see the louvers on the back. They pull some juice. Well, they're 110, and I got them hooked up to our little power station. We're gonna see if this thing works or not. Cut the switch on. Woo, that one works. That one works too. Them things are bright. That thing really is pulling some juice. It done dropped 0.2. In here it dropped 0.2 as well. Well, it went back up. Well, it goes up and down. They're both staying within 0.2 of each other, so that's good. Okay, now that we got this thing all put together, I put the lid on it. And I told you when I started, there was 2 reasons that I picked this toolbox in particular. One is because it has wheels. Even though this thing's not super heavy, those wheels are gonna make it a lot easier to move around. And the extendable handle, that's gonna make it easier too. But the other reason I picked this toolbox is because of this right here. It's stackable. You can open these up. And I bought this top toolbox right here. And now I got compartments that I can put all kind of stuff in when I go fishing. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah, this thing's cool. Not only do I got an awesome power station, but I also got the coolest tackle box at the lake. I'm just saying. That power station turned out awesome. It really did, and it was a lot more simpler than I thought it was gonna be. As long as you just do one step at a time, you can do it. Hey, if you like this video, then you're probably gonna like this video. So go over there and check it out, because this video is over. It's over, people. It's over.